this afternoon, it is my pleasure to introduce Keith Edmier. Keith is a New York-based artist who makes sculptures. Some would call him a sculptor. He makes sculptures that represent and refer to specific things, specific people, like his mother, or the actor and model Farrah Fawcett, specific plants, specific domestic interiors, like the home he grew up in. His work is personal and conceptual at the same time. Some of you are conceptual personalists or personal conceptualists as well. Jew, for example. It's playful, yet serious. And it's often, and I didn't find this in any of your reviews in art form or anywhere else, I think it's funky.
Yeah, yeah.
Funky figuration, maybe, something like that, and fresh. But it also has this sort of decayed look sometimes. Anyway,
Funky fresh.
funky fresh. Keith is represented by Petzl Gallery in New York, where he has had 9 solo exhibitions since 1993. Other solo shows include Neuger Riedschneider, the awesome and now defunct, I think, gallery in Berlin.
Oh, are they defunct?
I'm not sure. I looked and I could. Their
They have a
website.
website. They're anti-web.
Okay,
That's the only reason.
so they're not defunct. I hope they're not.
I just gotta invite. I hope not.
They started in the mid-90s, right when Berlin was starting to become a new thing.
Yeah.
At the Franz Hals Museum Haarlem in the Netherlands, University of Albany Art Museum, CCS Bard, which is the Center for Curatorial Studies Gallery, important exhibition curated by Tom Eccles with a catalog, lots of catalogs. That's up in Annandale on Hudson, New York, the Henry Art Gallery in Seattle, Washington, the Douglas Hyde Gallery at Trinity College in Dublin, Ireland, the Andy Warhol Museum in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, Contemporary Art Museum at the University of South Florida in Tampa, Florida, Los Angeles County Museum of Art, also known as the LACMA, Metro Pictures Gallery in New York, and Sadie Cole's HQ in London. And then there's a couple more solo shows in there that I skipped. Group shows, this is a long list, it's interesting. The High Museum of Art in Atlanta, the Stedelijk Museum in Amsterdam, Kunsthal Rotterdam, Netherlands, the National Gallery of Australia in Canberra, Arken Museum for Moderne Kunst in Denmark, the Israel Museum in Jerusalem, Paul Kasman Gallery, Marco, which is the Museo de Arte Contemporáneo de Monterrey in Mexico. Got that one wrong too. That's what they call it, the Contemporary Art Museum of Monterrey, which it is, but
Okay.
they go by Marco.
Yeah.
And you'd think it was Monterey, California. Anyway, Kunsthaus Bremen in Germany, Marlborough Gallery in New York, Denver Art Museum, the Yokohama Art Museum in Japan, the Museo de Bellas Artes in Bilbao, Spain, Palazzo Reale in Milan, Marianne Dosky Gallery here in New York, the Gemeente Museum in The Hague, Netherlands, the Galerie Thaddeus Ropac Gallery in Paris, Sculpture Center in New York, the Blanton Museum of Art in Austin, Texas, the Walker Art Center, New Orleans Museum of Art in Louisiana, Tate Liverpool, Aspen Art Museum, Tate Modern, Scottsdale Museum of Contemporary Art in Arizona, the KW or Cave Institute for Contemporary Art in Berlin, the Museo de Arte Contemporanea in Rome, MoMA PS1, 2 group shows there, including Greater New York in 2000. That's a big, I think, annual group show surveying what's going on in contemporary New York art that happens at PS1. The 2002 Whitney Biennial, Barbican Gallery in London, Marianne Bosky Gallery, did I ever say that? Museo d'Arte Moderno in Mexico City, the Museum of Contemporary Art Chicago, San Francisco Museum of Modern Art, Andrea Rosen Gallery, Thread Waxing Space, awesome alternative space downtown for many years. The new Museum of Contemporary Art, Shoshana Wayne Gallery in Santa Monica, in MFA basically. and Casey Taplin Gallery. Bunch of others that I did not mention. Press. Keith's work has been reviewed and discussed in the Paris Review, Time Out New York, Vice, Art News, New York Magazine, Blue and Art Info, W Magazine, ID Magazine, Sculpture Magazine, Contemporary Art Daily, Art in America, Art Forum, the New York Times, several times, the New Yorker, a couple of times, Parquet, Monopole, Chicago Tribune, Modern Painters, Art Papers, Village Voice, LA Times, Time Magazine, and it was a thing, that had art reviews, and Flash Art, which was an important Italian contemporary art magazine. What?
Don't forget page 6 too.
Page 6 of the New York Post?
Yeah.
Okay, gossip page. That's an impressive career, enviable. So he's from LA. He's kind of an autodidact. For example, he got into making things, wanted to make vampire teeth. This is from his Wikipedia page. And so he actually, I think, got a job or at a dentist's office to learn how to make teeth. Like, we all could learn from that. That was like in high school. Amazing.
Did you make the teeth?
Yeah, I'll show you a little bit.
Right, so here's the thing, he went to Cal Arts for a minute. So we would say, if I was being less candid, he attended Cal Arts, the California Institute of the Arts. There's no MFA, which is kind of awesome. So an autodidact teaches himself, real deal. So after his stint at Cal Arts, he moved to New York City, where, among other things, he worked as an assistant in Matthew Barney's studio. So that's interesting. Please join me in welcoming Keith Edmier.
Hello, everybody. Thanks for coming. I just wanted to start, wanted to just reference the idea that I really like how important artist talks were for me when I came to New York in 1991. And these are just a couple of elements of one. I'm going to reference a couple of talks that I went to back then. But the first one, how the artist started and did these two things, and I'll start my talk by doing the same things that he did in 1991, and I'll explain afterwards.
Okay, we need someplace to start.
So, so that's I went to a talk in 1991 at NYU with the artist Richard Archwager. I don't have any images of him. He's a really interesting artist. If you don't know him, to look his work up. And he came in, no slides, classroom, didn't just wrote on the blackboard, here, not here. Hit the desk really hard with his fist and just said, we need a place to start, and just proceeded to talk about this whole stream of consciousness stuff that just referenced everything, you know, a little bit of his work, but a little bit from where he came from, but everything from the alien chest burster to abortion rights, all kinds of things. It just blew my mind. So anyway, years ago, I was able to meet him, and I asked him just to, because a lot of my work, as Mark was saying, has to do with reenacting, proper word, taking maybe memory, a particular event, and re-examining that, like what it means now, the time that's passed. And so I was able to meet him later in his life and had him do an impression of his fist into a desk, which is in clay, and was able to preserve that as a little monument. So that shows them how I did. So it was really it's an amazing experience to get to meet him later in his life. So I don't know, that was like, again, when I first came to New York in '91, and there'll be another super important talk that I'll talk about a little bit later that also happened here at SVA, although I think it was on 23rd Street. But so I guess, and also I would have to say, if anybody wants to ask something, I don't know, during the during the talk, please feel free, I mean, it's, it's a good time. So but so I started just thinking and putting this whole thing together, and part of this is a chronological journey through where I started and where I'm at now somewhat. But I started thinking, I used to show pictures of just I realized that, like, what I wanted to do, I mean, I always wanted to be an artist, since I was or not exactly sure what that meant, although I have to say, I think it was being a painter in Paris when I was a really little kid, which was kind of based on just my father was really, I grew up was born south side of Chicago, and we grew up later in the suburbs of Chicago, but took us to the Art Institute when we were kids. But it was really about painting when I was a little kid. But the thing that I really realized I got into was like magic when I was a young boy. And I want to say I was about 7 in this picture, and that's what I wanted to do when I just this idea of being a magician. But I was more, it wasn't. I thought about this recently, like more so, and how that's kind of filtered into my art over the years. But I really wanted to be able to see something and make something that's never been seen before, and I was really also then interested in the mechanisms of, I didn't really care if it was real or if it was, if there was a trick behind it, but it just really fascinated me. So there was that, and the other thing, let's see, I forgot how I go, yeah, arrow. So, and then around the same time, I was also really interested in, this would have been in the early 1970s, but I think for whatever reason I was really interested in wrestling, like really early pro wrestling. This is like back with black and white televisions, back when like Andre the Giant and people like that. And I remember asking my father about, I just was like really early on, like I just was like, this can't be real. I mean, this is just, how can these guys just completely get, and they've been obliterated. But I got really interested in the idea of, of the performative aspect of that. And then a friend next door that was to me, Alan Kropp was his name, and we did a lot of stuff together. I had this idea of I was always doing things like creating like events, and we decided that we were going to have this, this kind of wrestling fight in the back of our backyard. And I started saving all these Flintstones vitamin bottles, and just was filling them with water and food coloring. And I stripped off the labels. This is a recreation. I decided to get one, and this would have been the bottle about 1972. And we had all these kids. We charged them admission to come in the back to see this fight. And he was like smaller than me, so it was kind of obvious that I was going to win this fight. To least, but I had him in on it, so I basically, we did this, and I might have just done something, we staged the fight and knocked him out. And then I brought out this, what I consider to be this magic strength potion, and which was basically, this is water food color, and I was able to sell it to all the kids in the neighborhood for like 25 cents. And then, because then he did this, so then he went and knocked me out. And I thought, well, God, it's kind of, and then I get into all this kind of trouble. My parents had it, they called me, parents of my friends called my parents, had to give them the money back. But I was just really interested in this idea of, I guess like just now, and think about even this talk, just this idea about reality, like, even like the idea of making art, like what is real, you know, even though it starts with something real, all these things, and just this idea. So I mean, there's also like an element of kind of like playing with reality, and I mean, again, I don't know how that really fit into art, but it was a performative aspect of it interesting. Anyway, that kept me going. And then a little bit later, this is again 1970s. I got interested in special effects. Because I was drawing. I started I drew. I started making clay sculptures as a kid. But then I really wanted to make things move. You know, so I wasn't so much into animation, like stop motion animation or drawing, you know, cell animation. I really wanted to do things actual scale. And I started getting interested in, you know, because I was interested in horror movies and stuff. But then I really got interested in this burgeoning field of, back then, of special makeup effects. And this would have been when I was, you know, 12, 13. This is a guy, this is in Larchmont, New York, and this is a guy named Dick Smith, and he's kind of like one of the pioneers of modern makeup effects, prosthetics, and he went on to do, you know, he did things like The Exorcist. This is when I visited him, this is Dustin Hoffman's head from a movie called Little Big Man in the late 60s. And anyway, he was kind of like my mentor, and I would just write him. Like somehow I also, and this is also back, you know, again, keep dating myself, but this was before, you know, there's no internet, right? There's no, you know, how do you get in touch with these people? I somehow knew that his phone, it used to be a book called Who's Who in America, and you could go into the library, and they had all these people were listed, the actors and people, and I just called him, and he was able to, you know, I mean, back then, you know, I recorded the calls because on a tape recorder, because it was expensive to call New York from Chicago. And anyway, he would help me out, and I went through my high school years making stuff, and my parents were very supportive, and they allowed me to use the family room to make this kind of laboratory where I do all this stuff. Like, I mean, now when I think about it, you know, like a lot of like chemicals and, you know, casting. So this is when I started, you know, getting really early on into basically what would become sculpture. And, you know, so I did that, and I built together a portfolio stuff, and I'll show you like a little and so then this has been
full head, and a lot of it is not something that a person wears. Like this over here is a dummy, like a corpse, and it has slight movement in the neck, but it's not to wear. It's basically just a model. Like say you need an insert shot of something coming out of a grave in a film, you do something like this.
And what is the fiber here?
This is a styrofoam, an expanding like a styrofoam that I use. It holds its shape.
Okay.
Just I don't use it a lot.
But you started out the same way with the clay mask.
Yeah, it was all a clay.
You did the whole
clay
thing in
sculpture, which sculpture comes into play a lot. You got to be able to make a three-dimensional model of what you want.
Okay.
So, where should we go from here?
Oh, I don't know.
This is a.
That's magnificent.
This is something I did. It's called cerebral mess. It's
Okay. Yeah, that was 1984. So anyway, so then and then also as Mark was saying, I needed to like pay for all this stuff too, and also like I wasn't sure. My mentor Dick Smith said, well, he didn't think if I didn't have the talent to do this, I needed a fallback career. So I did start working at 14 at this dental lab, Technique Dental Lab, and that was my boss. And my mother, it was below our dentist, so my mother talked Mike into letting me go down, and I did make these vampire fangs, but then I worked like during the summers like full 8 hours a day. I mean, he's paying me $2 an hour back then, and then on Saturdays I went and washed his car and cut his grass and stuff. But as a 14-year-old, I was making like a couple, fairly decent money that I was putting into all these projects. So I kept that going with Mike, and then that was his lab now. That's like the fangs. And so then when I decided to I was struggling with like after high school. I graduated early, but I about late high school, I always wanted to make art, but I was always confused over where, what that meant in terms of, because I'd already, put all this work into this career for prosthetics and had, basically wanted to go, was told that I needed to go to California, to Los Angeles. But yeah, at the same time, I was like, I had another friend who was going to art school and everybody was saying, back then Cal Arts was the place to go. So I just had it in my head, I'm gonna go to Cal Arts eventually. But I ended up, I basically left home when I was 17 and started working for this guy, Rick Baker, who was, he's, arguably now probably the most well-known makeup effects artist. But the first project I worked on, even though it was Captain EO for Disney for that Rick did, and to be honest, I was just like helping out with like doing some of the like really minor work, but on this character Flutter that hung around Michael Jackson's it was this animatronic character, but it was done for Disney as a 3D ride, directed by Francis Ford Coppola back then. And I just remember, as I'm this kid, and I did actually, he like Rick also did Thriller, so they were kind of on Michael Jackson's Thriller, and they were actually, Rick and Michael were fairly close, and actually I was odd circumstance, I had to go back home. My grandmother died when I was 18, and I get this phone call, and it was actually Michael Jackson called me to sing me happy birthday when I was 18. So that was but anyway, so this was like the first thing I worked on, and then so I kind of just fell into this, this world, but I still kind of, to be honest with you, I didn't want to, I was already disillusioned at 17 in the film business. I really wanted to make art, but I didn't know quite what that was. I kind of as this has traveled to my life, and maybe even again, like how Mark was saying, maybe we talk about this idea of conceptual art. I didn't really other than just that really early idea of my only knowledge of an artist was a painter. But I did have this idea of wanting to make something that was on the scale, making art that would use all the tools of contemporary culture and like the movie business. And so I guess I would have wanted to be somebody like Walt Disney or George Lucas later. Star Wars is a big influence. But so afterwards I went and worked, some friends that was working at Rick Baker's invited me to go work up in Northern California and David Cronenberg's The Fly. And so, and then I did the same thing. I was like 18 when I worked on that, and I was able to have a pretty cool experience working on that. So I did a lot of hands-on stuff, on that crew, but I was able to go to Toronto where we filmed it, and so to operate, because back then, like all this stuff again now is CGI, but it would have been animatronics, puppets, and things like that. So that's me on the set operating that would have been called the Brundle Bug with my boss in the middle, Chris Wallace, and then David Cronenberg on the left. And so, but again, I'm still super disillusioned with the movie business. But there was an art director on that film that said, Keith, you got to get out of Hollywood, and you really should go to art. You really should go to art school. You should go to New York. And she was kind of just was blown. I was kind of really interested in performance and experimental theater. So she turned me on to things like Robert Wilson and Pina Bausch and all this stuff. So I went back to, thinking that was what I wanted to do. Anyway, that's Jeff Goldblum and Jan Davis. And then I went to another talk at the American Film Institute in 1987, just by chance, because again, this is just something I just love to go to talks and hear people, artists, thinkers. I remember I was obsessed with David Lynch when I was that age too, and I went to go bookstores here and talk and stuff. But I went to this talk at the AFI, and it was all about I went to a symposium called it was all in virtual worlds, and this is again, like October or something, 1987, this guy, Scott Fisher from NASA was there. And he gave this demonstration, I don't even think it was, I think they were just calling it artificial reality back then. But it was one of the first demonstrations I saw of a virtual reality headset, and it was just all wireframe at the time. And I just thought, my God, this is the future. You know, this is like really what I want to do. It's like, you know, being able to like replicate environments and three-dimensionally, and it was like sculpture, and I want to make art in what then became VR. So what eventually became VR. So for some reason, I don't know why this guy Scott Fisher was at NASA Ames. I guess he gave me his business card, and he was able to help me over the time. Well, get back to I built a kind of an artist version of just trying to get out of oh sorry
Makes a scary beep in the place.
yeah, so then I spent a few years building basically a virtual reality setup of my own, and showed, this is just prior to when I moved to New York, and I showed it at a place, at a show called Cyber Arts in 1990. So I'll show you, I'll show you the beginning of the clip. So this is like 1990, and this is like a headset that was built, and then it was also a simulation chair. I'll just show you the beginning of this.
You're watching KRON TV, Channel 4. The news continues from the News Center for Northern California with Evan White, Emerald Ye, Steve Raleigh's weather, and Gary Radnich with sports. Now, News Center 4 at 11.
First, there was the radio, then the TV. Now the next step is the virtual reality machine. High-tech reporter Richard Hart gives us a look at a new industry coming out of Silicon Valley.
Virtual reality exists behind goggles that shut out the real world and substitute a three-dimensional artificial one. Once there, you can choose where to go and what to see. Pick up objects that don't really exist. Dozen companies that deal in virtual reality. Sense8 of Sausalito has one version that uses control knobs instead of gloves and a hood instead of cumbersome headgear. This is what it looks like under the hood. This is what the left eye sees, this is what the right eye sees, and you put them both together by looking through here. You can take a book off the shelf or move the furniture. The most novel approach belongs to a company called Home for the Space Animal. The experience includes a hydraulically activated chair that adds the sensation of movement.
This is more of like a programmed, almost a choreography, if you will, of emotions that a person is more or less against their will.
Before this becomes a consumer product, much development remains and unanswered questions, such as if a tree falls in a virtual forest and nobody's there, is there a virtual sound? In Los Angeles, Richard Hart, News Center 4.
So that was the back. Okay, so that kind of led me to just like wanting to then just move to New York. It's also the beginning of end of 1990, 91, and it's also, I have to say, it was like I thought we were going to be in World War. I mean, I thought it was going to be World War III at the time with the Gulf back then, and I remember I just thought I was going to get drafted, and it was just crazy down to think about how intense it was. And I remember just saying, I'm just going to do what I want to do, which is make art, and move to New York. And so I left the film business. I responded to an ad in the Village Voice at the time from internship at a gallery called Stuck's Gallery in Soho, and which at the time all the artists that they showed there I was really interested in Doug and Mike Starn twins, and Andre Serrano, those people. So I just got this job for free, just helping out. Moved to New York and just wanted to make art. And so, but I didn't know anybody really. I just had this kind of you know, this film resume of these basically a lot of some okay movies, but you know, a lot of like B movies and things like Nightmare on Elm Street, which will come up later. But so I was bopping around trying to find work. But we also at the same time were going to I had a couple of friends that were going to NYU, and we'd go see artist talks. And so this takes us to 1991, where I went to an artist talk here at the School of Visual Arts. That this would have been the month after I got to. I didn't actually get to see the body of sight, which was Vito Conji, Bruce Young, and Richard Serra, but I came for sight and non-sight for the film program, which was organized by Robert Nickus, who at that time I just met maybe around being around. I also have to say the art world, at least art world, but I mean, it was just very intimate. Like you go out and just meet people, but it was like I knew who. I should preface the thing too about art school, and I was really felt intimidated coming to New York, because it was the height of of theory in terms of I felt like height of things like Baudrillard's simulations, but yeah, and all this, and I just felt like, God, I have to just really read and bone up on my theory, and but I had known, and I was reading a lot of Peter Halley was one. I don't know if you guys are familiar with him, but he was really pretty of that era, and then so I went to see this talk, and it was another artist named Steve Benedetto who I was introduced to that night, and it was on the films of Robert Smithson and Michael Smith. So I'm going to come back to this, but so came to New York, but I need to get a job, so I started just sending my resume around to I just started, and also back then you could call artist studios, and I tried to call a number of people, and I sent my resume out to galleries, and the first gallery, the only gallery actually that contacted me was Barbara Gladstone, and they were working with a young artist at the time that was going to be his first show, named Matthew Barney, and I didn't know who that was, but but a woman named Clarissa Dalrymple, who had a gallery called Petersburg at the time, Petersburg Press, had the gallery just closed. Matthew was going to have a show there, and then Barbara ended up picking him up. But anyway, Clarissa and Barbara, and I brought in all that virtual reality, that get up and all the effects, and they said, no, you'd really get along really good with Matthew. So I was, through a roundabout way, I was introduced to him, and I ended up doing working with him early on, doing prosthetics for some of his early works. This is his mother in a prosthetic makeup as Al Davis, who's a general manager of Oakland Raiders, and this is for a document in, I believe that was 1991 too. And then and made these Satyr, worked on his prosthetics for the Satyr piece, Drawing Restraint 7, I think, which was at the Biennial around that time. And then I just bopped around. I worked for Koons for a while, Jeff Koons back on Broadway on the Celebration series, and sculpted an egg here that ended up in one of the pieces, which that was a crazy time. I mean, I won't go into too much about that, but anyway, and then I did some stuff for like Robert Gober, worked on specific stuff. So I was able to utilize some of these casting skills. And to be honest with you, I didn't think I was going to use any of these things. I really was really interested in technology, in making. I mean, I do things in retrospective. It was something about dealing with sculptural space, but it was like I didn't think I'd be working with all these materials, but anyway, I needed to get a job, and eventually, actually through Matthew becoming friends with him, he kind of like helped me to embrace just just like the material of who I was or where I came from, and so all the fears of all being this having to be this hardcore conceptualist and making this very theory-based work, I was able to just start using, like, looking into why I wanted to make art from the beginning, which is kind of like what I was talking about, all these early things. And I started gathering art, like objects and images from when I was was a kid. And these are all these like molds I'd saved in that was in that family situation. And they were like life casts. And so I did, I mean, so a lot of what and which is kind of like entered into my work to this day, is this idea of starting with something real and like an impression or something. This goes back to working in a demo lab, but the idea of I was really interested in the idea of casting, mold making, the imprint and all this kind of stuff. And so I'd save these molds, and I started playing around with what I could do with them. I made a sculpture. This is using my grandmother's cast in my grandmother's hands to make a pie crust that then was cast. My mother had saved all my original baby teeth, and and I just, as a sculpting tool in the beginning, reconstructed that into a palette that was then used to sculpt one of my first shows at Pesto. This was like this is actually just a small little gallery in Broadway in Soho. I made these piano legs that, long story. That what's that?
They're so Gopher-esque or Gopher-ish.
Yeah, I mean, I guess, I mean, I was starting to become aware of Gopher. Yeah, at that point. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, for sure. That was like definitely somebody that I was thinking, and also the embrace of the personal, the handmade, so that kind of thing was definitely coming to my, consciousness for sure at that time. And so, so I did that first show, and then there's also, like, about this time there was also this feeling, I have to say, almost always, and maybe other artists, you guys can relate to it. There's times like and I could joke about this because I mean like at certain points you just want yourself out of the work, like, I mean, and I've gotten criticized, which I'm kind of fine about, proud of it now, but Mark, you mentioned New York Times, and I got a review full page for this retrospective. It was in the Westchester section. I did get a really nice review from Holland Potter in the New York version, but I got it was Benjamin yeah, he wrote this review and said that he called me the most narcissistic person on the planet, and it just is because it's all about you. And I thought at the time it was pretty, to be honest with you, it was pretty well written, so it wasn't a complete, but I thought, wow, that's quite something, because it was not the most narcissistic artist, narcissistic person, this is like obviously before our current moment, but wow, so I did, but it was, but I started thinking, like, there's been these moments where, God, it's just like, where you're just like, well, what is this? Like, what, like, again, is this real? I mean, there's moments where, I wouldn't say that my work is therapy, but it definitely kind of exercises certain demons. There's definitely things that I've done, which I'll talk about, like in rebuilding the house I grew up in, that my memories shift from sometimes the actual memory of my memory of that to the object, which is kind of is a way, I think, of getting these things out. But anyway, there's just times where I kind of wanted to deal with other time frames other than my own story, my own personal histories, even human history. So that led me to other things I did, which would kind of like dealing with things that were more on a larger, longer, the time scale of the whole geological history of the Earth, or plants came up. So like one of the first things I did, the next show was this piece in the foreground is a cast corn stalk. That I grew up around a cornfield, so there is a little bit of autobiographical aspect, but it's in this pink dental acrylic, which I started, which is something, again, I worked in the dental lab as a kid, but I was really interested in this material, in this color being both something that's kind of a prosthetic, it references the body, but it's both inside and material that can go inside and outside. So it was just this material that I was really interested in, but also it got me onto a kind of I don't want to, haven't, not in a while, not in the last number of years, but there's a trajectory of my work that is dealing with botanical subject matters, and then they become sort of stand-in surrogates for sometimes figures, myself or others, and so I get interested in both life cycles of the plants, and histories, their relationships to art, that kind of thing. And then around the same time, when my friends that was going to NYU went back down to Florida, and he was a curator, an independent curator. He was doing some projects with the University of South Florida, and this would have been 1996, and we went down. I had sort of my first museum show down there, and I'd taken these snapshots. The picture on the left is a snapshot of this. The Evel Knievel, who was a daredevil in the 1970s, but I was amongst my kids, kids my age were really into them, but there's this doll that came out that I had, back to this idea of this illusionment. I somehow had thought I could capture him jumping the Grand Canyon, which I'd set up this shot of the instamatic shot of the Sky Cycle toy and a picture postcard of the Grand Canyon. Obviously it didn't work. It was outside, this piece of tape. But anyway, I had this thing, and it just kind of resonated with me, and there was an opportunity to meet Evel Knievel. Had retired. He was down around the area around the University of South Florida in Tampa, and I was able to, my friend Jay organized a meeting, and I just went to him with these photographs, and he agreed to doing a project with me for this first show, and allowed me to use all this, like borrowed his motorcycle, and in the background is this rocket from Snake River Canyon. Anyway, we did, but he proposed this idea of doing a sculpture together of him that was going to be, at the time, we were going to have it shown larger than life size in front of Caesar's Palace. But that didn't happen, but we did have the show, and there's kind of a little, if I can go out of the,
Our initials are reversed.
yeah, and our initials are reversed, so that, yeah. So this is like the first time where I started using, like interacting with somebody from my past and somebody else's biography. And he was cool for that.
It's gotta be a fountain, I think.
If I give everybody's attention for just a second, I know many of you here early about the sculpture project that you developed, the whole
Sure. Well, I was asked to do an exhibition here at USF. Initially met Margaret through Jay Dellinger, a good friend of mine, for several years, and wanted to do something about Evel Knievel for years, and it sort of stemmed from a photograph I took when I was a child around the time of the Snake River Canyon jump, and it's fortunate that when I came down to talk about the show, Evel lives around this area, and we were able to set up a meeting, talk about doing the portrait, and then and Evel actually, it was his idea to talk about doing a sculpture, and which I thought was fantastic. And I went back to New York and worked on what's shown now as a model for a large-scale fountain sculpture that we're going to have made next year. And
I think we should acknowledge Michael Gray, who's been so helpful at giving us access to Evel Knievel and the material that Keith needed to develop.
This is a toy. This is one of my Evel Knievel toys. And I knew I had seen him someplace before. Because when he was a little boy, the stores like Kmart, Walmart, Value Mart, they just came out with these cameras to catch shoplifters. And I remember him when he was about that high, stuffing that toy underneath. Just kidding. Anyway, I think he's got a wonderful career ahead of him, and I hope to assist him in every way that I can. I'm kind of an artist myself. I paint, and I certainly don't do the beautiful sculpture and work that he does, but...
Yeah, so, anyway, so that got me going, and I had both these, you know, I mean, I was also interested in the fact that he was interested in art or made art, and the other icon from that time that I was interested in working with was Farrah Fawcett, which I'll bump around a little bit. I tried to. She was took a little bit more time to. She made sculpture. And she wanted to. She actually she majored in sculpture. She actually has, to be honest, she had a B.F.A, I think. So she in UT Austin, UT Austin, and so but I wanted to do a sculpture project with her, and I started asking around, and you know, again, you know, it was just you know, a different world back then. It was kind of, you know, again, no internet, you know, but I was able to try to find people that eventually got me in touch with her. There was a curator out in Los Angeles named Irene Satsos, who ran LA Contemporary Exhibitions, and she introduced me to Farrah in 2000, and then we were able to. I just met with her, and I should mention some others. I should go. I'll bounce back this because I did some things in the before meeting with her. This is a long. I mean, I got time for time briefing, but although this is Lena Dunham, which was so this is also Mark had mentioned in 1997, 98, I did a show at Metro Pictures, and this is like an example of a piece I did with these Victoria water lilies, and I kind of got interested in them again as being these kind of surrogates for both humans, and they were cast from life from real plants, and they were also represented in this kind of color that was somewhat reminiscent of this dental acrylic. And so they're these night blooming plants, and they change the first night they bloom, they're female plant, and then they change sex and become male, and then they die. If it's pollinated, it goes down and can reproduce in water. So around the same time, this is like I had this you know, kind of was a nice pressure to have, but I just finished that show at Metro Pictures, and a couple months later I was supposed to do a show at Sadie Coles in London, and I didn't have an idea, but I have to say back then I had this real intense fear of I mean, I think that there's been a lot of, I mean, it's been, I don't, maybe it's apparent, but there's been this kind of this feeling more this feeling of fear of death and mortality at that time. I remember just being really afraid, like going on planes, and just it was just really intense. And I just realized I don't really have this fear of being alive before I was born in utero, and I started just visualizing that as a, you know, and I have to also say sometimes these things, even though they manifest themselves in physical and sculptural forms and physical matter. It was just this feeling of like wanting, like just like trying to come to, bring into focus, what is that? Like that moment, like I'm still alive, but yeah, I don't have the same anxiety about, I was born in 1967, but I don't have anxiety before I was born. And so anyway, I had this idea of doing the sculpture of my mother when she was pregnant with me. And again, it was like a couple months before the show, and I initially did, but I wanted to basically visualize this idea of, again, I guess if this guy, it's all about you, whatever, but this idea of visualizing myself in utero, my mother, and then I kind of psychologically couldn't deal with the idea of making a nude portrait of my mother. Kind of visible woman thing, but I was struggling to get the show done, and I was walking around Times Square, and then I saw there was a it was there's a play, a farcical about Jackie Kennedy. And I had no real connection to Kennedys, other than my mother was very much into Jackie Kennedy, and as a kid she cut my hair and kind of the John cut. But I went in and went to this play just trying to like clear my mind, and Jackie Kennedy comes out at the end in this pink Chanel suit after the assassination in Dallas of JFK, and I thought, wow, that totally works. I can kind of almost use the suit as a way in which it kind of can close the figure, but it also becomes these pink layers of skin. And so I kind of use that as a formal device to make the sculpture, and with the fetus of me inside. And so I worked with a textile designer, and we reproduced the Chanel suit, a Chanel-like suit, and so it was real clothing, and then real casts. I actually had a cast of my mother that I took in her 50s, but she was then like 22 when I was born. So this kind of becomes I guess this is like the thing I didn't think at the time, but it's kind of the piece that kind of comes up a lot, mostly with my work. But the other thing I was interested in were these roses that were in the motorcade, and I was interested in the idea of these objects that kind of witnessed this event. So I recast this bouquet of roses, and also in kind of a red translucent dental acrylic. Okay, so I did all this stuff, and but I finally got the opportunity to work with Farrah, and I actually, that was a piece that really clinched the deal, was doing that was the sculpture of my mother. She really liked that, and I have to say, she was super cool, kind of just wanted to just push it as far as we could. And so we did this project. I went to Los Angeles, had a studio in Venice, California, from 2000 to 2002, and I got a little, if you want to keep on going with the video thing, I got a little thing that just tells that story. And so this was in 2002.
I mean, please, it's a work in progress anyway.
Farrah and Keith intend to
there
make a or it shouldn't be A, because it might not be make collaborative. It's really, I'm having a really hard time trying to come up with that.
Because they keep saying to me, well, what's the finished piece going to look like? I said, no can do. And it's even if you could get into his head, it's not maybe completely there yet. It's evolving. They all go, like, so stop with your artist babble. I said, I'm an artist right now.
I didn't even know, just the chemistry, if it would, if we could do it,
or if the catalyst would be.
Exactly.
I know what that means.
Because I've never really collaborated with any.
and just keep it, I mean, for it to be sculpture, like I mean, that's the primary focus will be sculpture.
Right.
Well, then that's...
No, I like that we're making a sculptural collaboration.
Yeah.
Because I think of it as something we're doing together. I don't think of it as me, because the whole point in doing the casting is so that I can get up and work on it.
Yeah,
Whereas
exactly.
if I'm lying there, I'm the model. That's,
yeah. And
it's
that's
not really the case.
So, you know, so we had, we started using each other as models, and so this so we started with doing like clay sculptures, made body casts of each other.
What year is this?
This is
God, I'm going to do the best thing of you
2000.
that's ever been done. I hope you appreciate this.
And so, yeah, so we spent like about 2 years.
You're but clay in my hands right now.
But so, yeah, so it evolved from doing this portrait of her, and then she wanted to make this sculpture of me, and so it was also, I think, again, this idea of working with somebody else, and also at that time it was really interested of also interested in this idea of losing control. You know, the idea of working with this project at the time. A lot about losing it. There's a lot of elements, and like it was really kind of cool that we were able to just have this really intense, intimate collaboration in the studio. But there was just so many crazy things about her life at the time, and people and stuff. But you know, trying to keep that out of it.
It's like that. There we go. That's, and then Farrah should be a little more straight ahead. There. That's okay. And I don't want to break your finger.
It's not. It's not. No. It doesn't hurt at all.
I like the idea of seeing the shadow.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, maybe building this up.
Let's speed up through this. So anyway, so we built these clay models, and then did these bronze and marble pieces that then we the opportunity show at LACMA and Andy Warhol Museum. So then just kind of set up in 2003, I think this is one thing I wanted to just mention that we talked about was this house sculpture. So anyway, so I did this, and then moving on to I had this opportunity to do this retrospective. Well, this is like a lot to get into, even this lava piece. So much to get. Yeah, I'd like to talk about this, but yeah, so I went. This is actually down at the University of South Florida. I got interested in this idea. I guess this is also in the idea of working with on a different kind of scale other than just the human scale. This is actually came out of the Farrah project. I wanted to like just do something that was again pre-human, prehistoric. And I went down to just before I was in Los Angeles, but before moving back to New York, I went down to Hawaii, and I got really intrigued with this idea of working with basalt as a material. And I knew that these local artists could go to a lava flow and with plaster molds and cast it, it ended up being really too difficult to do in that respect, but I had this opportunity to work with, again, the University of South Florida, who, I did the project with Knievel, and we did this, this collaboration with graphic studio down there, and I was able to, make it a large scale sculpture that was, we were able to cast basalt lava into these large scale sculptures, and then there was also these cycad plants that were made, that this took a couple years to make. So this is kind of like, I have to say, and this, I mean, if anybody wants to later have any questions about casting or something, this is probably the thing that pushed it for me in terms of like, the level of like research material. I also have to say, like, I start these projects just wanting to make something and then don't quite sometimes know what I'm getting into, but it was about having to research, trying to get this material so it would work in castable. And so this took us a couple years to do, but it was this big lava sculpture. So then that was shown part of this at my show at the Bard, the Hessel Museum, this retrospective. And part of that show was this commission to do this piece that we talked about, I was mentioned a little bit before. I had Tom Eccles, who's the curator at the time, thought about making things. So most of this work that I had made originated in that, you know, the seeds of these things up to that time were things were from that house that I showed you with the living, you know, the family where I worked at. And like you said, what about the idea of reconstructing this house or finding a house around Bard that was like similar to the house you grew up in? And we started looking at houses, and maybe we'd have an off-site project where we could show work. And I started looking into that, and we couldn't find an exact house. And I realized that what I really wanted to do was try to recreate the actual house, or the actual interior of the house that I grew up in Tinley Park, Illinois, in the early 70s, 1972. And I had bought on eBay, just happened to have it, the original sales brochure with the floor plans of the house. And so it turned out that the interior of the house fit almost exactly into one of the gallery spaces at the museum. So this is again something that took like about 2 years to produce, but I began in trying to reproduce this house and wanted to reproduce it in a way that was almost like a model home, or a home that you just would go into, you know, like prior to moving in. So I used this, and I took family photographs from the time, went back to the original. My parents don't live here anymore, but I was able to get some like original vinyl asbestos tile from the kitchen to use as a reference, made models. I had worked with an interior designer at the time to build this out, and then that was shown in as this interior of this sculpture that was inside the museum space. And so these are some of the rooms, and they were reproductions of this is kind of going back to painting, you know, because even though I attempted to do that, some of these paintings myself, but that was I from photographs I used paintings that were in the house. My father, in those trips I was saying, he took us to the Chicago Art Institute, and we had posters all over the house of there were like the Chagall, and there's a Picasso, and it's a Picasso there. And but as a kid, I thought that they were the actual paintings. I didn't understand the idea of reproduction. So I decided I painted a couple of these myself, and then I realized it's going to be I wanted them to be super authentic, and I worked with had a painter come in and help me, and we got the permission from like Chicago Art Institute to go and take photos of these paintings, and they were reproduced in the house actual size. And it's funny, I had to build this build this piece out. We built a little catalog before the show, and I had a I won't say it was, but an art critic came by at the time, and actually I thought that we had actually borrowed a Picasso painting, which was kind of a nice compliment. But it's yeah. And so all these things were kind of made from hand. It's kind of most of these things are made from scratch, and like I had to like again this incredible opportunity with this interior designer I was working with. We were able to get the carpeting made. It was all made made anew from sometimes original materials kind of thing. But there's a lot to go into about this thing, other than just this idea of this is bigger. Bigger issues I want to talk to now about this idea of the real and the imagined and memory. And I remember building this thing, and I was thinking, God, it's gonna just bring up. I mean, I was a little bit nervous about the memories it would bring up, you know, and what that's like to go back into that space, and you know, and so much of it was so technical that, you know, trying to get something just right. And I remember there was like one going to like a living room space. I think it was just one of the spaces, and I realized it just I looked at a corner of the room, and it was just the drywall when we were building it, no furnishings or anything. And there's something about that, just the proportions of that room, that just took me back into that time space. And you know, like I had to like shake myself out of it, like, as I thought for a second I was back in 1972, and that had never really happened before with me with an artwork. But I have to say, what recreating this, my memories of that house had been over time, because I had spent so much time with this recreation, and kind of been replaced the original memories with this reproduction, this simulacra. So I don't know. And again, that's just something I'm thinking a lot about these days.
There's an Arschwager connection, actually.
Yeah,
Fake patterns.
patterns, yeah,
Kind of
yeah,
architectural, like detached.
yeah, yeah. And I don't know how much time we have left, do we? Yeah, so I mean, there's other stuff to talk about, but what I'd like to do is, in keeping with that, is I have this opportunity to, since I am at SVA, to I'm telling about those stories about how these things over time, things get changed and bent, and these personal interactions happen. But when I went to that talk I was telling you about in 1991 at SVA, I was able to, one of the participants I mentioned that I didn't know at the time, Steve DiBenedetto, I over the years have become really good friends with, and he's actually here. I don't know how it just showed. And so I had and it's one of these things that you know, like an artist talk. I mean, this is obviously, I mean, this is getting recorded. But back then, you know, there was a transcription of this this talk, but I remember having a very vivid memory of it. And I went with this friends I was telling you about, that we go visit, and go to different artists talk, like Arschwager and this talk. And so I have this opportunity to talk to Steve. I said, oh, well, what if we just this transcription of this talk was then reproduced in Flash Art magazine. I don't know if you guys have, it was a magazine, an Italian art magazine, came out. It was, you know, when did it start? Do you remember? You know.
80s.
Yeah, but this transcription of the talk came out, and it was again with this all about this Robert Smithson spiral jetty. And so I thought we could read that, we could do this just redo the end of that piece. Yeah, you don't mind. Yeah.
You're not gonna show it to me?
Yeah, we're gonna show. Yeah, we're gonna show. Yeah, so should we show the
Is it
and
the video?
Yeah, so it's yeah. So this was the film that was shown.
North, mud, salt crystals, rocks, water. North by east, mud, salt crystals, rocks, water. Northeast by north, mud, salt crystals, rocks, water. South by east, mud, salt crystals, rocks, water. South, mud, salt crystals, rocks, water. South by west, mud, salt crystals, rocks, water.
That film was played, and so at the time, the conversation was with the artist and Peter Howley. I'm gonna, since he's not here, I'm gonna play Peter Howley. Yeah, and I thought to be it's just a nice connection to because we have actually Steve's actual words that were yes, and we're just gonna end it kind of like how
Well, part of what we said was, part of what I said at the end. What do you call them?
Oh, just a little bit.
So, as I said at the time, at the end, there he is at the end of the spiral, at the conclusion of Wavelength, the other film we showed. The viewer is in a similar position, literally at the end of the line, we seemingly know where to go. When the photo of the ocean fills the entire screen in Wavelength, and the camera's penetration of the room is complete, the container has been completely flattened out, and our ultimate destination is revealed to be the limits of our perception. Smithson delivers us to a similar conclusion at the end of his film. The editing equipment with which it was constructed is seen in a room where a photo of the spiral jetty is tapped to the wall. In both films, you end up with a still image, but one that implicates an even vaster space. Peter?
Let me read one more thing. This is from Moviegoer by Walker Percy. In the evenings, I usually watch television. I go to the movies. Weekends I often spend on the Gulf Coast. Our neighborhood theater in Gentleman has permanent lettering on the front of the marquee reading, "Where happiness costs so little." The fact that I am quite happy at a movie, even a bad movie, other people, so I've read, treasure memorable moments in their lives. The time one climbed the Parthenon at sunrise, but it is not much to remember. What I remember is the time that John Wayne killed 3 men with a carbine as he was falling to the dusty street in Stagecoach. And the time the kitten found in Orson Welles at the doorway in The Third Man.
So is the implication that this man's life is being replaced by the life, world, and space of the movies? Merging with these images is essential. It's keeping America going. It's like an immense corporation.
I can't feel it, but I think that it's difficult for us today to understand Smithson's fascination with science. For Smithson, being interested in physics or chemistry was a stance. Yeah, sorry.
Technical difficulties.
Was a stance against what he saw as higher liberal humanism. more importantly, defining a history that went beyond the Renaissance. And that included all these prehistories, like the future, was a way for him to get out of the whole humanist mindset.
And escape into some other past, some other time zone. I suppose it connects differently. Different historical and archaic conditions with contemporary technology, conditions as well. Both of these films brought to mind the film 2001.
It's on TV tonight.
Let's get out of here. That's what we said. Okay. So I don't know how many of you people know anything about those films, but it's quite a thing.
Yeah, if you want to come back to the, yeah.
Okay, is that, should we?
Sorry, then? Okay.
Or, but we could keep going.